UF went out to Utah this week and got embarrassed and outclassed. There is no way around that. We're not going to hide from that or try to spin it into a good thing because it's not. That was about as disappointing a performance as you could have ever hoped for to start year 2 of the Napier era. So let's talk about what went wrong and what UF needs to do quickly before this thing gets off the rails. Guys, it's not about the loss. Florida is going to lose ball games this year. There was 0% chance of them running the table and having a perfect season. And I think all of us knew that, right? But the way that Florida lost was incredibly frustrating for Gator fans. But I'm going to tell you why the most frustrating aspects of Thursday night's game may actually be the most fixable. A lot of this is going to come down to Billy Napier himself. Before I get too far into this, I want to start by saying that I am a Billy Napier fan. I think he is a fantastic recruiter, a pretty darn good CEO, and a great human being. I want him to be the guy to right this ship, and I want him to have the time to do it. All of that being said, Gator Nation is not known for being patient, and games like Thursday night don't help. And not because the Gators lost, but because the Gators looked unprepared and out-coached. So let's talk about some of the most glaring problems. If you are not new to this channel, you know that special teams is so important to me. A large part of that comes from being married to a national champion punter. And a lot of that comes from being around during the Urban Meyer era when special teams were everything. They were the most important thing. If you watch Swamp Kings and you hear about Champions Club and the guys being treated, that worked hard, being treated really well, one thing they didn't mention in Swamp Kings that is a fact is that Meyer's specialists ate first. Anytime there was a line to do anything, the specialists were at the front of the line. And that is because Urban Meyer understood exactly how important special teams are. I am not convinced that Billy Napier has the same approach to special teams, and I think it needs to change right away. First of all, 2 men wearing number 3 on the field at the same time. That is inexcusable. Honestly, that's kind of a fireable offense, not for Billy Napier, but whoever was responsible for checking those lineups. There is not a scenario in the world that I'm going to buy that makes that acceptable. I don't care that they were freshmen. I don't care that it's the first game of the season. That is somebody's responsibility. And somebody didn't do their job to check to make sure that there weren't 2 number 3s on the field. I could even wrap my head around it more if it was the end of the 4th quarter in a blowout and a ton of guys are playing who don't normally see the field. So we didn't realize we were going to have 2 of the same number on the field. This was the beginning of the 1st quarter. There is no excuse in the book that I am buying that makes this an acceptable penalty. And it cost Florida. It sent Utah's offense right back out there and they scored 7 points. It is completely unacceptable. And then fielding punts inside your 10. This is insane to me as well. They teach you in Pop Warner, park yourself on the 10-yard line and don't go backwards. This is elementary. There is no part of this. There's no decision that needed to be made in that moment. No, it went over your head. You let it go. Every time. This is something we saw last season. It was frustrating. And now we pick back up and it's the exact same thing. And I get it. There are people that were like, he's a freshman. He wanted to make a play. I understand all of these things. This is a coaching mistake. I don't blame the player. I blame the coaches. And then I blame him more because it happened again. You sent him out there a second time. And that decision was made again to attempt to field a ball. This time within the 4. It's not okay. That is Special Teams 101, and it tells me we're not spending enough time on special teams. Another special teams error, not enough men on the field. Florida's not good enough to stick 8 men out there and expect something good to happen. We weren't good enough sending 11 out there and expecting good things to happen. So we definitely can't shortchange ourselves. That is the little details. That falls on a special teams coach. It was a special teams play. All of these things are falling under the same person. There was a 21-yard punt. And I understand things happen, right? Your punter's not going to hit a perfect punt every single time, but a 21-yard punt is incredibly detrimental in a close game where there were already a lot of mistakes. And then a missed 31-yard field goal. If we don't have a kicker that we can rely on to make 31-yard field goals, we have a problem. I hope that means there's going to be an open tryout next week, because I find it hard to believe there's not somebody on UF's campus. There's probably somebody in that locker room, but somebody on UF's campus that can consistently hit 31-yard field goals. We're not talking about 50 yards plus. 31 should be automatic. And then we had guys that were trying to bring balls out of the end zone. Let it go. This is insane. These are the details. Special teams matter. Special teams win and lose games. Florida's special teams unit on Thursday cost them 10 points. 10 points Utah scored off of special teams mistakes. Then you add in the fact that Florida missed a field goal. That's a swing of 13 points. Do you know how many points Florida lost that game by? Math's not that difficult, y'all. Special teams has to improve immediately. I talked to somebody who has knowledge of how special teams works under Napier and under Mullen, and you know what they told me? That they aren't surprised, because Florida doesn't spend a lot of time on special teams right now, that they spent a lot more time under Mullen on special teams. And one of the things that Florida fans complained about the most was Mullen's special teams. So Napier needs to not just talk the talk. He needs to walk the walk. That means special teams needs a much bigger emphasis than it's currently getting. Let's talk about the next problem, play calling. Listen, Florida needed to establish the run. And I understand our offensive line did not play well, but it felt like Florida wasn't even trying to establish a run. 6 attempts combined between Johnson and Etienne going into halftime. That is unacceptable. There was 10 attempts combined between the two of them the entire game. I get it. The offensive line was struggling, but you've got to give it more of an effort to establish the running game than you did. Let's talk about third down play calling. I honestly didn't have a problem with play calling a lot of the game, but third down was atrocious. How do you call plays that don't even get you to the sticks? It felt like every time there was a third down and mid or third down and long, the play was designed for the receiver to catch the ball short of the marker and then run for the first down. That means you are anticipating a defender making a mistake. You aren't going for the easy yardage. This is not going to work every time. It might work sometimes, but when you are in a third down situation, you want something that works every time. And it certainly is not the plays that were being called. You design routes to get to the first down marker. You are leaving way too much to chance. That is a coaching decision. The clock management was terrible, particularly on the last drive. 0 sense of urgency. It seemed like they had never even practiced a 2-minute drill. Urban Meyer was one of the best coaches in the country in the 2-minute drill. You want to know why? His ones went against each other every single practice running 2-minute drills. That is how practice ended every single day. Honestly, watching what I watched on the field, I'm kind of surprised if Florida has ever practiced a 2-minute drill, because it certainly didn't look like it. Florida also had 0 sacks and 0 turnovers. You cannot win a game this way. Kurt Herbstreit, who I know, listen, he doesn't love the Gators. Gator fans don't love him, but he commented on how UF had gotten bigger defensively, but not faster. And honestly, that is something that I heard from several former players when we had that scrimmage open to former guys a couple of weeks ago. Our defensive line is bigger. I don't know that they are faster, but they have got to figure out to design some schemes to get pressure on the quarterback, because we will not win football games if we don't. Florida got to the red zone 4 or 5 times and they walked away with 11 points. They actually moved the ball well until they got to the 20. If Florida had scored on those opportunities, we're talking about a different ball game. And some of that does come down to play calling. Procedural penalties, that is all about discipline. We have listened to Billy Napier going into year 2 discuss discipline ad nauseum. It is something that he takes very seriously. It's something he's told us he has worked to change, but it appears we don't know how to line up properly. These were the same issues we had last year. It is disappointing and not a great sign that these problems have not been fixed. Again, I'm good with talking the talk, but you've got to walk the walk. Already harped a little bit on offensive line, but listen, they gave up 5 sacks. They were terrible. They're going to have to play better. And that's not on the coaches necessarily, right? Players need to execute. And I know that we were missing our starting center, and I know we had a lot of new pieces, but that offensive line is going to have to improve. Napier is wearing too many hats. There is simply not enough hours in the day for him to effectively manage all of his current responsibilities. He needs an offensive coordinator and a special teams coordinator, and he needs them fast. And you know what else he needs? A sense of urgency. Did Florida have any idea of the time crunch they were in towards the end of that game? A team takes on the personality of their coach, and Napier looked cool as a cucumber on the sidelines. And I know a lot of times that is a good thing. Napier is even keel. He doesn't fly off the handle. His personality is one that players connect with because they're not getting constantly yelled at, chewed out, whatever. But you know what? I think we need him to get fired up a little bit on the sideline when the game is on the line, and we need these guys to move their butts. Do you know what a get back coach is? I don't think Napier has a get back coach because I've never seen him get fired up enough to have somebody have to pull him back from the sidelines. I need to see that from him. His players need to see that. They need to light a fire under their team. You can only do that if your head coach is sending that signal. And Napier wasn't. You would have thought that Whiffs was halfway through the second quarter and Florida was up at the speed that we were moving at the end of the fourth quarter. It's inexplicable to me. But you know what? The good news is that most of all of those problems that I just listed and all of the things that we saw on Thursday night are fixable. Procedural penalties, stupid special teams mistakes, uncreative play calling. These are all decisions, choices, right? Poor ones, but choices. They are less about personnel and more about coaching, and that is fixable. So what we're going to see next is, how do the Gators respond? How do they come out next week? Are they fired up? I get it. It's McNeese State. This should be a gimme game. But we need these guys to show growth, to show improvement, to apply what they worked on in practice and get better. Did they hit the film room hard? Did they learn from their mistakes? I need to see that. And the good news is they have a week with McNeese State before they play Tennessee. They can fix some of these things. They have the time, but they've got to do it now. Listen, I am not a moral victories person. A loss is a loss, and I am not trying to sugarcoat that. But they outgunned Utah, okay? If you are the kind of person that looks for a silver lining, I'm going to give it to you. The defense has improved. Tackling looked a lot better. Florida's depth and their conditioning both looked better. Even late in this game, no one looked winded. We're talking about a game in an altitude that most of this team has never played in. We're talking about the first game of the season, and it's hard to be in game shape without actually playing them. All of these things are a win. This team didn't look gassed. They were still giving 100% effort. That is a good thing. Listen, it seemed like it took a long time for the defensive play calling to get in. But listen, I think we're going to see rapid improvement there. This was the first game that Austin Armstrong has ever called, and this defense has a ton of new faces. So that part is going to get better. But this defense is already an improvement over last season. Utah was only 3 of 13 on third downs. Dare I say maybe we will stop having nightmares about third and Grantham this season? It's possible. The defense gave up 24 points, but 7 of those were on the interception deep in Gator territory or off the interception. Those points are on the offense. That they only gave up then 2 explosive plays, and I know they were at really inopportune times, but all of this is improvement. Florida's defense played better against Utah than we saw them play last season. Things are headed in the right direction there. And the offensive line has some really talented young offensive playmakers. Trey Wilson is a total stud. Caleb Douglas had a circus-like catch. We saw some good things out of Odom, who's only 9 months removed from ACL surgery. This offense has some weapons. And listen, even Graham Mertz was serviceable, right? Everybody was so concerned about how Graham Mertz was going to do. He was the biggest question mark nationally. How is Florida going to do with Graham Mertz? He threw for 333 yards and a touchdown, and the lone interception he had wasn't his fault. He took a ton of hits because that offensive line did not play well, and he never seemed flustered. This is a win, Gator fans. Graham Mertz is going to be serviceable. Last year, when Florida beat Utah, Gator fans were convinced that Napier had fixed all of our problems and righted the ship his very first offseason. It took just that one victory to get way too high on a team that honestly had a long way to go. It set up unrealistic expectations, which then later turned into disappointment. Let's not do that again this season. This is one loss. It's a loss that everybody outside of Gator Nation expected to happen. It does not mean the season is doomed. It means there's more work to be done. UF has 2 weeks. We all know they're going to win against McNeese State. But it's what they do in the 2 weeks, for 2 weeks from now in the swamp that is probably going to define what the rest of the season looks like. We're positive, and we bought hard on this team. Has our confidence in 8 wins taken a little bit of a hit? Maybe. But would we feel a whole hell of a lot better if Florida can come out in the swamp in 2 weeks and beat Tennessee? Absolutely. Will they do it? I don't know. That's on the players. That's on Napier. That's on the staff. I believe in Napier. I think he is the guy to do it. We're going to see if the Gators getting punched in the mouth has them focused over the next 2 weeks, or if they're going to lay down on the mat and quit. I'm betting it's going to be the former of the two. The Gators can and will and should get better. So I'm excited to see what we've got coming down the pipeline next Saturday. Our very next video is going to be about what Billy Napier can do to fix several issues now. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. Thank you all for tuning in, and go Gators.